My Lords, I thank my noble friend Lord Beauchamp for instigating this debate and, of course, for all noble lords who have spoken in it. My Lords, there can be no doubt that this debate is both timely and vital. Timely because the government is, we are told, close to announcing its decisions on its consultation paper of last November. Vital because if the government sticks to its Green Paper proposals, then the system of social welfare legal aid will be decimated, if not destroyed. It's as serious as that. Nearly 750,000 people will no longer be eligible for legal help. Huge swathes of social welfare law in housing, in debt, in education and in employment will be declared out of scope, and legal help that catches problems early will no longer be available in many cases, and the eventual cost to the state, as we've heard in this debate, will be much, much higher. My Lords, these proposals are really nothing short of an attack on the poor, no more, no less. They're the wrong cuts at the wrong time and hurting the wrong people. It's therefore hardly surprising that many groups have banded together to try and persuade the government to just think again. This debate, my Lords, is part of that process. I pay tribute, if I may, to Justice for All, the umbrella group covering a lot of other groups who have taken up this cause, of course to the Law Society and to the Bar Council, and to many members of another place of all political parties who have said, firstly, this is wrong, secondly, that there are alternatives, and thirdly, that to implement the proposals as they stand would be disastrous, uncivilised, discriminatory, and hugely counterproductive. My Lords, of course there must be some cuts. We accepted that in government, and we accept it now. And indeed we did cut, controversially in some cases, some legal aid. If returned at the last election, we would have made some cuts. Not as many, nor as fast as these proposals. The cuts would probably have been in the field of criminal law. They would have been as a result of our white paper, Restructuring the Delivery of Criminal Defence Services, published in March 2010. They would have been controversial, but they would have been substantial, but not as substantial as these. But, my Lords, the point is that whilst in government, we refused point blank to cut social welfare law, and indeed we increased it. One figure from £151 million in 07-08 to 208.4 million in our last year, 2009-10. My Lords, we also raised the financial eligibility limit for civil legal aid by 5% in 2009, making it possible for many more to legally receive the help they need. Now, of course, one of these proposals is for the government to cut eligibility significantly. And one of the other things that we did do, and perhaps the thing I'm most proud of in my time as a junior minister, is we saved South West London Law Centre from closure. Why did we do all this? Firstly, it's a time of economic difficulty. It's madness to cut legal help to people in this way, something the government intends to do. But more importantly, because if legal aid doesn't give access, or some access at least, to justice to those who are dispossessed or disadvantaged, whether through poverty or bad housing or unemployment or low wages, because of the colour of their skin or their mental and physical health, what is the point of a legal aid system? The case has perhaps never been as well put as by the new Conservative Member of Parliament for Maidstone and Weald, Helen Grant, in an article in a national newspaper in February this year, and I quote, As civil liberty is to the freedom of our nation, civil legal aid is to the protection of its citizens. For some of our most vulnerable people, it is the only sword and shield in their armoury. My Lords, common sense and the expert research that was referred to by my noble friend Lord Hart, of Professor Hazel Jen and others, tell us this. We know that early legal advice changes lives. We know that legal problems come in clusters and not singly. We know that lack of such early and comprehensive advice can lead to problems escalating out of control, leading to relationship breakdown, unpaid and hopeless debts, and sometimes a decline into crime, and all the misery that brings with it. Yet, my Lords, that will be, I fear, one of the almost inevitable results of these proposals if implemented. And then, of course, the cost to the state, to all of us, the taxpayer, where no legal help is given. The figures that the CAB put out about the savings by spending £1 of legal aid money were given by my noble friend Lord Beecham in his opening speech. My Lords, it is financially so hugely counterproductive. My Lords, and the lawyers who practice this type of law, as has been said in the debate, they're not well paid. Some of them have given up the possibility of well-paid and careers in other types of law. And yet the government plans to take 10% from each modest fee that they receive for an act of social welfare advice. We know a number of CABs will not be able to carry on. We know that private solicitors who have been under pressure for some time may be tipped over the edge. But what should also be said clearly, is that the Law Centre movement, which does so much for the dispossessed and underprivileged in our society, is likely to be crushed overall. There's a proposed 77.6% reduction in funding for legal help and an 83.6% reduction planned in the number of legal help cases, all at the same time as local authority spend is falling. Whether it's intended or not, these proposals may well destroy law centres with a disastrous effect on their clients. Now, why these proposals? On the whole, previous Conservative governments have been generous in their support for legal aid. The Liberal Democrats have demanded, and they did demand of us, more money to be spent on legal aid and criticised our cuts. And they too have argued for social welfare law. How can ministers have signed up to these proposals? My own view is not that ministers want to play the role of the wicked uncle who wants to destroy anything good that comes across. It's simply, and here I really follow what my noble friend Baroness Kennedy of the Shaw said, it's simply they just don't get it. Their view of legal aid is very limited, is very old-fashioned, so they don't see its relevance to social welfare law. Ministers keep using the mantra that their proposals are to protect the most vulnerable, when quite obviously they are the exact opposite. Their measures, if implemented, my Lords, would, far from protecting the most vulnerable, directly harm them. Whatever they do, in the end, Her Majesty's government should stop using this 1984 Orwellian-type misuse of language. In my view, though, the noble minister who is to reply to this debate does get it. His whole history, his whole political history, shows him to be someone who does understand the importance of what is about to be destroyed. My request, our request, for him is to fight, please, fight these proposals within his department. Don't let these fundamentally anti-liberal measures be implemented. He enjoys a huge reputation in this House, both personally and, of course, politically. If he were to succeed in mitigating these proposals, that reputation would soar even higher. Now, why should he bother, he might ask? Why should he bother? Legal aid isn't his portfolio, it's someone else's portfolio. But the reason why he should bother, my Lords, is this, that this isn't fundamentally a legal issue at all. It's not just one for lawyers in government or outside government. And it's not one for non-lawyer ministers and non-lawyers generally to shy away from. It's a simple issue. It's about right or wrong. It's about justice or injustice. In the end, my lords, and I say this to the noble lord, it's a simple question of morality. Yeah.